Okay, moving on. I'm a little disappointed, just a little bit, that they didn't take the obvious opportunity when they have a card called Pool Shark to have the guy literally be a shark. Like, there's fish people in Bilgewater, clearly. So why not have a shark man be the pool shark? That would be funny. That would be a pun. This is why Riot should hire me. Because I'm smart. So, Pool Shark. Once again, you can see the framing in this image is extraordinarily clear. We have this arc right here, and inside this arc is bright light and like this golden light framing the character, highlighting him all along the sides. He's saturated, he's dressed in purple, where everything else is like mostly grays and browns and kind of dull colors. Which again, the color helps draw our eye to him and highlight him along with the framing device of the thing around him. And by the way, smug motherfucker, isn't he? And then the only other thing that sort of draws our eye and our attention is the brightly colored orange ball and the velvet of the pool board where he's playing with his tail, I guess, as a flex. Which, again, like, in terms of the visual storytelling, oh yeah, this guy, he's looking down on you, literally, because we're looking up at him from below. He's got a confident smile on his face, he's got a power pose. He's knocking these things around, so the visual storytelling of, oh, this guy's good at pool, and he's gonna beat you at pool, is very present here. I also do like that, like, that's one of the things that Legends of Runeterra has done so well, is it has expanded the bestiary of League of Legends. For there was a long time there where League of Legends felt mostly like it was like human, 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 void monster, human, 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 undead, human, 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 undead, human, 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 some furries down in Shurima, and that was kind of it. With the Vestaya introduced, they added a lot to the bestiary, but Legends of Runeterra has really done a lot to make Runeterra itself feel much more like a fantasy world, rather than just like a place with a bunch of humans in like Middle Ages cosplay running around. So, the pirate cutthroat, or the prowling cutthroat, rather. Let's start with framing. First, we have her victim. He's down here. He is... Remember how we talked about with Twisted Fate, how if you box a character in, if you squeeze them in the image, then you can create a feeling of being pressured or of being unable to escape from something. That's what's going on here. The victim of this prowling cutthroat is down here. He's boxed in under the sail, between the barrels and the railing and the ropes here. This creates this tiny little space for him to occupy, where he feels trapped in. And even if you expand it out here, he just has this tiny little sliver of nothing, which creates this tiny claustrophobic little space for him, which makes him look vulnerable. It makes him look like he is not in control of what's happening in the situation. Contrast that with our prowling cutthroat is like, she can't be here because that's his space and she's trying to remain unseen, but she has like all of, even if you let the barrels be a barrier, she has all of this, oh, hang on. All of this all to herself, and she fills that space completely up. She's not encroached on by anything. She has the space to herself in a different way, which again makes her look powerful and him look helpless and soon to be dead. Now that thigh gap, though, this is kind of a misfortune situation again, where it's like, I'm sitting here going, no, hang on, wait, where's her ass? Like, if her legs are that far apart, how? Wait, no, that doesn't, so this is not, like, correct anatomy at all. It's a stylization, again, and one that I feel like, again, to me, this looks uncanny, like, this looks too much. Like, you know, most people's thighs touch, right? Like, that's normal. Like, even people who are very thin and skinny, like, a lot of their thighs still touch, because they're supposed to. It's kind of, it's a little bit too much for me, but if your mileage may vary. I do like the rest of her, like, I really like her pose. I like the whole, like, the arm coming up with the knife getting ready to strike and her looking over. Like, that's a really cool dynamic pose with the things, like, with the arc of one knife here and there. It makes her look dangerous. It makes her look coiled and poised and ready to spring. I like the lighting on her face a lot, actually. I like the little, like, the shininess on her face and her nose, as though she's either sweating or as though it's just a cold, dark night with lots of, like, dew in the air. It has this glisten, this gleam. that makes her seem more present, more physical, more human, but also dangerous somehow. I don't know. It's probably combined with the pose and the blood red of the bandana she's wearing. She looks dangerous. Like, she has a little bit of that Rob Liefeld thing with pouches for no reason. But it's like, it's okay. It's fine. I also like the use of the lighting. Like, you have the light of the lantern here, right? So the lantern is lighting up this whole wall back here. It's lighting up the whole space around the guy, but the light never reaches her. It's being blocked. She's hidden from his light, which means that, like, he can't see her. And again, visual storytelling being used very efficiently. And then there's these kids. This is from Kudos Productions, which is another one of the studios that have been working on the expansion to Legends of Runeterra. Then there's these kids. And they're just delightful. Look at these adorable little things. They've got a bubble cannon. That's cute. Shell shocker. What does that thing even do? Oh, it has a tune. That's about it. Okay. My greatest strength is probably my command with the common people. And also, apparently, my spelling is really good, too. This is just lovely and kind of inventive. It's interesting how there's very different art styles in Bilgewater. Like, on the one hand, you have all of, like, this stuff. All this dark, dank people with powder kegs in the middle of the night and, like, gritty and edgy and dangerous and raw. And then on the other hand, you have stuff like this, where it's just like, cartoon funland in the pirate world! Like, basically fucking Kingdom Hearts up in here with how lighthearted and cutesy it is. But I guess, like, Bilgewater embodies both things. Both pirate drama with lords and murder and assassination, stuff like that, and adorable little turtle children playing in the surf with their bubble guns. So color here. Very different than everything else pretty much in Bilgewater so far. These colors are extremely bright and light. There's no sense of that heavy, like, wooden weight to it that you see in a lot of other places. There's really very little shadow going on anywhere in this image, which gives this a very bright, cheerful feeling, which works very well with the character designs, because these guys are fucking adorable. They're so cute, look at them! Which I like. Like, I like that there's that diversity. I'm just kind of surprised by it, because it didn't seem like something Riot were especially going for. So, composition. You can see here again, we're dealing with a slightly Dutch angle. Not that much, actually, but there's a slightly Dutch angle going on, being kind of created by the splash and this curve of the waves, which I just find really aesthetically appealing somehow, like to have this S-curve just kind of cutting through the image of the surf. And the characters here, there's not so much of a frame highlighting them as such. Like, you can kind of see that they're being framed a little bit by the water and the tree, but mostly they're just in focus because they take up the majority of the space in the image. Like, they're the biggest thing here. They're the obvious thing to look at. Man, those water effects are rendered nicely. Like, just look at the curve of that. Like, something that's deceptively hard about rendering water like this, like, and drawing it and making it look like it's really liquid that's being, like, burst around and flying fast, is, like, if you get this even a little bit wrong, the gravity doesn't look right. Like, it doesn't look like it's really flying around. It doesn't look like it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, but look at all the little curves and bends and twists that the artist has thrown in here. All those little things that give this feeling of this big wet glob of magic water that's being launched out of whatever the hell this is. Some kind of Nautilus shell launcher. And that's really difficult. Like, it's a small thing, but all of that stuff right there, that's fucking difficult to render correctly. Like, this little plume of water that kind of snakes around and then goes into the main... That's nice. Oh yeah, crabs in chat, by the way. I appreciate that. Thank you, chat. Let's see. Anything else to talk about? No. I mean, much of the same stuff we've talked about already. Light being used to highlight the most important characters, and then this character kind of hazy and kind of out of focus compared to them, a little bit more in the background. And Crab. But that's a good card. I like that. That's delightful. And then, like, right back to the other Bilgewater aesthetic, where everything is, like, dark and heavy, and, like, there's shadows everywhere, and everything's kind of wooden and built, and everything seems like it's almost collapsing. Rah, rah, rah. Do YouTube still take down accounts doing emote spam? I don't think so. To the best of my knowledge, YouTube has eased off on that a little bit. But, like, maybe be careful not to do it too much. Let's see, was there a thing I missed? Of course it's Poro. Yes, Syndra. Of course it's Poro. Sorry for missing that one when it came up. Anyway, Mr. Krabs has really fallen on hard times, hasn't he? He's a pack mule for some random dude in Bilgewater now. I used to own a restaurant. SpongeBob, me lad. I can't do his voice. So here we have a creature that looks a lot like a smaller version of Tahm Kench, I feel like, which raises some questions for me. I think the idea of Tahm Kench is, as a demon, he took on the shape of things that lurk in Bilgewater. Like, he's taking on a shape that's appropriate for his environment. He likes to hang out in Bilgewater, so he took on the shape of one of these creatures and and that's why he looks like that. And this is not necessarily a demon, but it's just Tahm Kench is mimicking the same species. I think that's the explanation that they're going with. Anyway, bunch of interesting little Easter eggs hanging out on this thing. We've got the Lockout of the Iron Solari. We've got the old, what's the pendant that used to be used for the support quest for Shurima? But that thing you did passive gold generation for supports way back when. We have a mask that's not Jin's mask, I don't believe, but we have Shaco's mask hanging out up here, being all, why so serious about it? We've got a health potion, some more health potions. I think there's a Morellinomicon up here. And stuff like lots of little Easter eggs. And of course, it's not a needlessly large rod. It's a, it's the magic pen, thing. It's not called magic pen anymore. It's that thing. You know which one it is. Oh, and a Duskblade. Yes, good point, chat. Good catch. Anyway, lots of Easter eggs here, which is all very fun. Again, framing, it's not as explicit, but you can see, like, the barrels on here with this very good little boy sitting there. I love rats. They're so cute. And then the barrels over on the side here, and the character that we're supposed to focus on, highlight with, bright light, basically. Now, we've talked about Dutch angles a lot, and this is a picture that's, like, very Dutch angle, like, very... like, really, really tilty in its construction. And this is one of those pictures where I feel like that doesn't really do anything for it. Like, it's not really necessary. Like I said, a Dutch angle is usually employed to create a feeling of instability, to create a feeling of chaos or movement or dynamism. That's also how it's used in movies, by the way. Notice that when you're watching a film, when the camera tilts, it's because they want you to feel off balance. If the director is good and they know what they're doing. Don't watch Battlefield Earth. But here, like, this isn't really a scene that needs that very much. Like, this thing is a trader. It's a black market merchant that's trying to scam you, basically, is sort of the characterization of the character. But the Dutch angle here, I feel like it's mostly there because the artist wanted a way to fit in, like, the tall load on the back of the crab mule thing that's carrying the things, like, so that they could get all this stuff in here. And that was easier if you tilted the image down, because then you have, like, a taller space to paint into. But in terms of the feeling, the mood of the composition, I don't feel like the Dutch angle does very much for it right here. Very effective use of light, though, because, again, you still have the feeling that this is like this dank, dripping underground black market cave place. Like, full of shady characters and dark shadows and dripping water and just kind of damp and unpleasant. And still, the bright natural light that falls on our main character doesn't alter that mood. Like, it doesn't make it feel less dank and oppressive. It just highlights the character. And that can also be kind of difficult to do that right. Again, Kudos Productions. You can kind of see, if you look at Shell Shockers also, which is also a Kudos Productions image, you can see that they have a style in the studio. Like, you can kind of see that same approach to color. Because even here, where we're not, like, in the brightest sunlight above the water, but we're down under the water among the corals, where things are a little bit more shadowed, you can still see that light pastel color approach to the composition of the scene that gives it the same mood, as the Shell Shockers had. Like, you have kind of that same color mood, where it kind of looks like a promotional art for a kid's cartoon, or something along those lines, with, like, Coral Kids, Thursdays at 8! That kind of thing, which works very well, because, again, they're illustrating some very cutesy little creatures, these little coral creatures. which are hanging out down here. And the coral creatures seem to have gotten their hands on... You see that it's a water bubble thing with magic, like pinkish, purplish magic coursing inside it. They seem to have gotten themselves their hands on something that's very similar to this. So there's a continuity between the two images where, okay, so this is a special kind of water magic that just kind of exists here, and which these creatures are curious about. And also, like we talked about on the Gangplank image, if you look at the creatures out here along the edges of the image and you zoom in on them, you can see that the painting out here is way sloppier than the painting in here among the focus of the image. Because again, doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't need to be detailed out here. Here it just needs to be functional, but here it needs to be detailed and very, like, highly rendered. Which again, always look at that if you're a concept artist. Always take notice of how other concept artists choose to spend their effort, because you only ever have so much time to complete a piece. Like, there's always a time limit, there's always, like, a budget limit where you have to complete X number of pieces in X amount of time. And so, like, pacing yourself is a really important lesson of looking closely at concept art and game art, is to just notice how much effort isn't used, how much extra effort isn't spent, because it's not worth it. 1,000 people now. Good lord. Hello. I'm always surprised when I do these streams that 1,000 people want to listen to me ramble like this for several hours, because it's gonna be several hours. I hope you all have drinks and food and pillows. I don't know. Nice thing to put your feet up on. I do like this character design on the creature. Like, I like that the coral on the head is simultaneously being used to kind of simulate hair or horns, and also that apparently they blow out these little bubble things. Which, I don't know, are they oxygen? Are they responsible for putting oxygen into the world? Who knows? But there's a lot of interesting questions being asked about, like, what are these creatures like? What do they do? What are they about? I also like that you can identify each one of them. Like, you can see the pattern of red across the green is different for each one. So it's not that they just all have the same pattern. It's like a identifying feature on them, which is, in terms of character design, is very well made. Is a very good little detail to have. When you have a race of creatures like this that are all kind of similar otherwise, even if you can do different stuff with, like, the number of coral things on their head, little things like that of like finding a way to create individuality between characters is really good character design, in my opinion. Okay, moving on to the DREADWAY Deckhand, who also summons powder kegs, because of course. So this is one that's created by an individual illustrator. This is DREADWAY, who I think is a freelancer who works for Riot. I don't, to the best... Man, I looked this up before we started, but now I've forgotten. I can't remember, but I think this is a freelancer. I don't think this is a writer. I think it's a freelancer. And again, you can see a very different style, especially in the face of this character, than in a lot of the other art in Bilgewater. Like, mostly the environment rendering and, like, the clothes and stuff are very much the same as the rest of the card art, but the face especially, and, like, the character design sensibility, the way the hair is rendered, is noticeably different than the rest of the characters in Bilgewater. I think there was a thing... Oh, Mr. Mine HD, I must say, tattoo artists must make a really good living in Bilgewater. There seem to be only full-body tattoos. Yeah, I think it's lucrative. I think you make a lot of money being a tattoo artist in Bilgewater. So there's a little bit of a difference in style there, which is, this seems more anime-inspired, in terms of the way the stylization of the face than a lot of the other characters, which your mileage may vary on that one. Anyway, framing, same thing again. You have these two parallel lines running across here that creates a framing of the character. The light of the torch is being used to draw your eyes specifically to the character, which also warms up their colors relative to the coldness of the rest of the environment. And then, in addition to that, you've got moonlight, or at least it looks like moonlight, coming down from up here, highlighting the character on the other side, which emphasizes the environment that they're in. Also, this is clearly like someone who's sneaking... we could fight them at dawn when their crew is awake and their cannons are primed, or we could leave them a gift tonight, nice and quiet-like. And that's very much emphasized by, like, they're constrained between these two narrow slits of the ship, but it also gives them a certain momentum. Like, it gives them a movement, as though they're sneaking under the cover of night. And to do a thing, and you can kind of see that in her posture as well. Like, this, she's kind of low, with the shoulders up, and kind of hunched over forwards, like being careful, looking around. So the environmental storytelling, the visual storytelling here is actually pretty good. Now, I'm not sure I like the anatomy on that arm, because, like, I think her elbow is supposed to be here, and then it goes out into the hand, but the glove kind of obscures where her elbow is, which makes this arm look too long, as though the elbow would be out here, and then a very, very short arm. The foreshortening is kind of... I think the foreshortening is a little bit messed up, but that's just a personal opinion. She also has a waist, as people are pointing out in chat. That as well. That much more than Miss Fortune does, which I appreciate, is that she looks like she could have internal organs and have room for them. Which is nice. Like, that's a good thing to have as a person. Speaking of waists, oh boy, there it is again. Like I said, this is sort of a thing I have about 6 More Vodka, is like, very, very thin lady, very, very thin lady, huge, giant, buff man dude, very, very thin lady, very, very thin lady. Like, it's a thing. It's a thing that happens. So, this is the bounty board, and we've been here before. In fact, we have seen some of these posters, I think, before, because this is the bounty board that the Poro plunderer was sitting in front of. I think he was perhaps on the other side of it, but it's the same bounty board, which I think is a nice detail that kind of reoccurs across various bits. Lots of Easter eggs in the background here. I think Garen is on a wanted poster here, or maybe Darius. It's hard to tell because they look so goddamn similar in their face construction. This looks a lot like Braum for some reason. Probably isn't. We've got the Minotaur Reckoner, if you remember him from Noxus. He's out here. We've got what looks like Kled out here, which is ultimately not surprising whatsoever. And maybe Alawi? I don't know. I don't think so, actually. But yeah, I'm sure there's a million Easter eggs for people to look at here. I don't think I can catch them all. But she's taken one down. Like, she's a hired gun. She's off doing a bounty. And again, the visual storytelling is pretty strong, that she's just taken a bounty from the board. She's off with her big gun to go and hunt the bounty and do the thing. So, not a lot of framing here. Like, you don't have that explicit frame with, like, things that are creating a specific space for her. So the framing is done instead with light, because you have this shaft of sunlight that bursts down here, and then it's bounded up by these characters in the foreground who are much more in shadow, while she is brightly out in the light, highlit, especially on her face, drawing your attention to her as the center of the image, which again, since the composition needs her to be easily centered in, like, this vertical slice of a card art, is just, like, what the composition demands. And because she's completely centered in the image as well, that also helps draw your eyes straight to her. Lots of interesting characters in the backgrounds, though. Like, I like this big fish guy. He's cool. Like, I think he's a cool character. I think he shows up somewhere else, if I remember correctly. I may be wrong about that. We'll see. I like this guy. Like, I like that he has a little hat with feathers on it and, like, a revolver. Instead of the giant Bilgewater cannons, he's got, like, a tiny little revolver thing going on, much more of a cowboy vibe, mixed with a Renaissance fair reenactor, which I think is kind of cool. Then there's these boyfriends back here, and they are boyfriends. I mean, look at them. Clearly, they are boyfriends. And there's the Poro Plunderer, by the way. And there's lots of contrast and interesting character designs in the background. And then we have Large Lad, Big Boy, Chunky Fella, the Bubble Bear. And he seems to be eating, you know, those bubble things that the Shell Shockers were shooting and that the coral creatures were looking at. He seems to be quite fond of consuming those. So they are some kind of recurring thing across a lot of the cards, which I wonder if there's lore behind that. I wonder if there's something behind it in terms of Bilgewater lore. Is it some kind of resource? Is it something people farm, or is it just sea creatures eat this stuff? Is it just magical energy? I don't know. So his character design is based partly on an axolotl. Like, you've got these little fuzzy tentacle things, which, if I remember my biology correctly, axolotls use those to breathe by filtering oxygen out of the water through them, like with these wide tendrils that catch a lot of water and can therefore extract a lot of oxygen for them. It helps them breathe. And I think that's kind of a cool thing to bring in here, because axolotls are more typically associated with freshwater and rivers than being associated with seawater. But it's kind of cool to see it brought in here. It's Swampert! Yeah! I think it's tied to the mechanic that refills spell mana. That's a good point, actually. Do all of them have attunement? That one has attune. Yeah, they all have attune. Hey, good catch! That's a great catch. Nicely done, Patrick. That's a very good catch. So those things are tied to attunement, probably, because they've been in all the art that of creatures that have attunement. Nice. That makes sense. I like his big fat body. Again, like I said, having characters in game art who are fat without being a punchline, or without like the fatness being like, oh, look at this disgusting, ugly slob, ew. That's kind of rare, which is a bit of a pity, because like there's so much more you can do with a large body than just, oh, it's evil or gross or whatever. And that's so overdone. So this is more interesting to me that it's like neutrally framed, that he's just a large lad who likes eating, and he has these terrifying claw hands also. Like, soft and round and soft and round and spiky, 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 spiky. Which I think is a cool little bit of character design contrast, is that his form is apparently, like, it looks to me like he can alter his form, his shape, like he can turn his hands into claws when he wants to, in order to grab these little bubbles of magical energy and snack on them. And that's just like a nice little bit of character design contrast. Anyway, framing the shell, the clam shell that he's sitting under, is doing the work of framing him. As you can see, the background of the environment is mostly like the same shades of blues and purples and greens and stuff that kind of inform his character design. So if he was just framed against this as a backdrop, he would kind of fade out into it. Like there wouldn't be a strong contrast between the character and the backdrop. So the seashell gives you this neutral, flat, dark background against which his big, bubbly body can be highlit with the light coming down from above and act as much more of a contrast, which I think is very nicely done. I also like the rendering on here is really good. Like, you really get a good sense of his three-dimensionality, which can be very hard to do. Like, rendering things to look this shapely is hard work, I gotta tell you. Then we have a golden narwhal. Which seems like a weird card to me, because it's a 2/4 for 3, and it's elusive, but it's also vulnerable, like, by default. Which, I don't know, probably some edge case use for that somewhere, but I'm not sure if I would use it. So, why is this narwhal being hunted? Well, you can tell, because it's got gold on it. Legends say a pale horned whale once stole from the bearded lady. As punishment, the lady covered the greedy creature in glittering gold, so it would forever tempt the avarice of others. Which I think works really well. Like, it's a cool character design. It's something that looks... It looks recognizably enough like a whale, like a real sea creature, but it has this Monster Hunter-looking golden horn thing going on it that creates a really distinct, unique character design. Because the one thing is, like, when you think of Nautilus, for example, like, he's surrounded by normal ash sharks. Like, these are just normal sharks. This is a hammerhead, this is like a tiger shark or a sand shark of some kind. Great white sharks out here. Normal ash sharks are down here with Nautilus, which is like, okay, that's a little weird for a magical world like League of Legends. So here we have a sea creature that is much more decisively alien-ish looking. And good lord, is the poor creature being hunted relentlessly. You can see harpoons being shot into the water. You can see a giant net being, like, raised below it in order to catch it and drag it up. You can see all these pursuit ships just chasing the poor thing down. I kind of feel bad for it, honestly. But also, I think the color here is kind of self-evident, almost. Like, you have the dark of the sea in the background, then you have this bright golden, shining light completely dominating, like, your impression of this space of the image. And you can see that they're also using that in the card art itself, where it's like, yeah, the golden horn is the thing. Like, that's the thing that frames this character as interesting and unique, and so that's what you get. Compositionally, not a lot else to talk about. Like, it's kind of its own attention grabber. And you do get a good sense of speed, I think, from this image. Like, from the curving of the whale's body to like the deepened perspective of the space and the harpoons flying by, as well as these little beard hairs that kind of give you a sense that it's swerving, basically swerving to avoid the harpoons coming down. It's a nice little illustration. Not remarkable as such, but nice. So here we have a girl who I'm pretty sure I saw her on Gangplank's crew. Yeah, there she is. I'm reasonably sure that's the same girl. Or someone with a very similar aesthetic, at least. And yeah, again, not a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Like you can see, there's a flat neutral, like there's a fairly set of neutral colors in the background that highlights like the brightness of her upper body and the hairdo. You've got the harpoon poking into this space that's otherwise mostly bright white and kind of neutral and pale, giving you this line that draws your eyes straight to her as a character. I like that they are willing to hide her face behind the harpoon gun itself. That's something that, like, notice this when you look at a lot of artwork of characters that use guns or sniper rifles and stuff like that. Oftentimes the artists are really unwilling to let the gun, like, be in front of the face and occlude it and, like take focus away from the face itself. Because, like, the face, like I've talked about before, is... the human eye is drawn to faces. It looks for faces. It wants to find them. So if you block it off, you remove a point of visual interest from your composition, which a lot of artists are not willing to do. Anyway, yeah, not a lot of interesting stuff to talk about here. I like the energy of the crowd. Like, I like that she's clearly, like, Taskmaster, right? Like, once she fires the hooks, have to move fast. Blood in the water brings all manner of company, and none of it is welcome. So she fires the starting gun, basically. The first shot at, presumably, well, this poor little creature. And once the blood is in the water, then the crew of hookmen, who are the people who are, like, grab onto the creature and either cut it to pieces or drag it aboard, have to, like, instantly burst out and jump into the water and get ready to carve this thing up before sea monsters are summoned by the smell of blood. Which, I like the energy of that. Like, there's a lot of frantic movement going on with the characters behind her. I also like the bright white sails, and that are almost kind of fading out with the clouds themselves, which gives you this feeling of mistiness, almost. Which is a nice mood. It doesn't add very much, but it's a nice mood. So here's a good one. Remember how we talked about scale? Yeah, that's a big fish. That's a large sea serpent of some kind. Holy crap, this is like Dune levels of big serpent snake. Let me check. There's nothing came in. No, good. I really like this. I like the sense of scale in this composition, that these guys are very, very small and incredibly optimistic if they think they're gonna take on this thing. And so, color, by the way, not a lot of light here, actually. This is one of the first images where we haven't seen light specifically being used to highlight characters. Here, the highlighting of these characters is in their color contrast from the rest of the image. Because here you have all this white sea foam basically being dragged up onto the body of whatever the hell this is, and that highlights that blood red, that shock of blood red of the little sail that they've got going on there, which instantly brings that into focus in contrast with, like, the mostly dark, very neutral tones of this roiling sea, and even the body of the sea monster itself, which is mostly desaturated. So this shock of color right here draws your eye and your attention to them in their tiny little boat as they apparently feel that they have a shot. It's just like, yeah, we've got him, boys. I wrestled hogs all day back on the farm. We can handle a big one. Are you sure about that, Bubba? Oh, yeah, damn sure. I just gotta hacker till you wheezes, man. I love the optimism. Poor dead bastards. Anyway, I need to have another drink, I think. So, the monkey idol. This one's a souvenir. Oh, this is misfortune. The crew nabbed it from a crazy old rival of mine. Turns out the fool's ramblings about ancient mysterious powers weren't too far from the truth. So, monkey idol. And this seems to be connected to the powder monkeys. They seem to be either worshipping it or perhaps even spawned from it somehow, because you can see the little tails of dark kind of billowing out of the mouth of the thing. And we have, I think, one of Misfortune's guns lying right here. And it seems to be holding one of Misfortune's giant musket bullets. So perhaps the monkey idol here is the thing that's generating the powder monkeys that Misfortune uses to fight. Not 100% sure. Anyway, framing, we've got the curtains and like the treasure box and the curtains on behind the window here, which has a very bright, flat color. And then you have this big, dark monkey idol with the glowing eyes in the middle, which all of it draws your attention there, and the framing does a great job of showing you exactly where to look. And we know, by the way, that we're on Misfortune's ship, because look at the lock down here. Heart-shaped, which is the kind of thing that Misfortune uses as a symbol. Other than that, I don't think there's a bunch of... Oh, heart shapes in the window, by the way, too. That's fun. I don't think there's a bunch of other interesting details here as such. It's a fairly static image because the monkey idol, of course, is not a character. I like the design. Like, I like that it has these little bulging cheeks coming out in like, the construction of the thing, which makes it look cute, but then that terrifying, like, the mouth that looks like it's almost opened in a little squeaky howl or something makes it look kind of vaguely scary along with the big, bright, round eyes. Okay, super chat. Hey, TB Sky, just wanted to thank you for all the content you've made. Helps as I'm cleaning hospital rooms. Oh, shit, Draco. I salute you, man. Lady, person. That's a tough job. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have protective equipment. Because, damn, like, especially cleaning, that's an essential thing to do right now. So, thank you very much. I kind of feel bad almost taking money. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for the work that you're doing. So, the monkey idol summons powder monkeys. Okay, that's clear from the mechanics. I should just have read the card. Then I would have known. And the powder monkeys themselves have a little bit of a splash art of their own. Now, there's something interesting going on with the painting of these little things. Or maybe that's just, nah, you know, I just think the artist isn't using too much effort out here. But I do like the design of these little things, like that their tails are a fuse, and that they seem to be glowing with light from the inside, not just through the eyes, but through their ears as well. I think that's a cool way to design them to look like they're a little burning thing that's almost blowing up all on its own. And they're cute. Like, this is adorable. Like, it's kicking its friend in the face behind him because it's running off with one of Misfortune's bullets that it's got and doesn't want to give up. The composition here is really strong, by the way. The rope that they're running on gives you this perfect line that kind of draws your eye to this monkey, to that monkey right there. Everything that you need can be found along this one line. So long as your eyes are, like, following that, which they will be because it's so prominent, you can draw their eyes to anything that you want so long as it's on the rope itself, which I think is very well done. I like the little detail that the rope is almost burning in half here because they're setting light to it with every little step they take. They are adorable, aren't they? Another Yordle. And another obvious use of all the same techniques we've talked about already. He's in light, completely lit up with sunlight. This guy's in shadow, even though he's further ahead in the foreground. And this is actually interesting. So, there's lots of different techniques that you can use to create visual interest, to draw a person's eye. And we've talked about how size is one thing that can really, like, dominate an image and really be used to draw people's eyes. What's interesting here is that this guy is way bigger in the frame. Like, he takes up almost half of the whole picture is just him, but he's not the point of interest at all because this guy has the framing and the light and the color doing the work of highlighting him instead. And you can see that happening, that, like, the barrel that he's standing on helps him literally stand out in the foreground, or rather in the middle ground, rather, of the things that are in the background. The very bright sunlight that's illuminating him and his spear and his bright white fur. The white fur is important too, by the way. If he had brown fur, it would be a lot harder to pick him out from the ship behind him. And, like, this chocolate golden brown hair all of that helps really single him out as the most important thing in the image, despite this guy being closer and bigger, which is like, that's good work from the artist, is that they're able to do that. They're able to have a thing that's way bigger than the main subject and still have this be the main subject of the picture. I like that a lot. That's hard work. Isn't the guy in the back to the left the same guy in TF's art? This guy right here? Or one of the ones over here? I don't think so. Wait, the mouse disappeared? There we go. Should be back now. But yeah, like here you can really see how powerful light and color can be in terms of drawing one character out instead of another. And it's used very well here. And interestingly, there was probably an opportunity here to use the clear blue sky. Like if you twisted the camera like a few degrees to one side so that he was framed against the light of the against the bright blue of the sky, you could probably have done that, but they didn't need to. You can spend much more time like showcasing the ship as well, just because this is so strong and clear, which I think is very well done, honestly. And then we have Slotbot, who's a casino robot of some kind, or perhaps rather a demon. I'm not really sure what to make of that mouth right there. One prototype spun 3 bombs and then exploded. Later models had this feature removed. So it is a robot then, I guess. With a very cool character design. Like, there's a couple of interesting things going on with Slotbot here, because... and a couple of confusing things as well, because I can't really tell if he's supposed to be a robot or some kind of organic creature. Because of the head, like, because of this right here looks like it's supposed to be an organic head, but then the rest of the body is robotic. I don't know. That's a minor character design thing. It's not really important. I do like the hat, because Slotbot here has this big, or rather not big, this tiny black head on top of his body with these glowing eyes. Now, if that had been framed against, like the glowing eyes especially, if they had been framed against the background, which is clearly very bright, they wouldn't stand out very much. So you have this giant sombrero-looking, almost mushroom head-looking thing going on him that creates, again, the kind of dark background that you need for glowing eyes to stand out. Other interesting things? Not a lot. Like, I don't think there's a lot of Easter eggs anywhere in the image. Like, I think a lot of what's going on here is obvious in terms of the things we talked about already. He's very brightly colored. He's very saturated. Everything else is desaturated and much less brightly colored. He has the backlight that kind of highlights the entirety of him. The light falls on his golden or brass robot body and his pants, his hammer pants that he's wearing for some reason. He's got the bright purple cape that makes him stand out amongst the relatively drabber color environment that he's in. A perfectly effective little piece of art. Not interesting as such, but Then we have this lady, who, like, now there's a character design with some distinction to it, isn't there? Oh, I need to blow my nose just a sec. I swear, every time I sit down to stream or record something, that's when my nose starts giving me trouble. I'm allergic to streaming, that's the problem. So there's a couple of interesting things going on here in terms of color. Things that I wouldn't have thought that they'd put in a place like Bilgewater, but this lady is like bright green and pink, which is like very distinctive and unusual. Like even her pants down here, even though it's less obvious, are pink. And she's got this bright purple vest on, which I think is... I'm not sure if I like it. Like, I'm kind of unsure of it. Because on the one hand, that's really fucking bold, and it's incredibly distinctive. Like, holy shit, she stands out among Bilgewater characters. And that works because she's a brash gambler. Like, she's someone whose, like, whole personality is, I have giant knuckle irons and I slide coins across a table over a poster with Twisted Fate's name on it. She's brash. She's someone who's loud, who wants to create trouble, who wants to be noticed. So having the character look like almost like she's almost kind of like a character from like an 80s dystopian punk futuristic punk scene or something, like from a Final Fight game or Streets of Rage or something. So on the one hand, that works really well because she's kind of grounded in the Bilgewater aesthetic by her tattoos a little bit as well. But then with the fedora and the pink card and that shock of pink permed hair, that's an interesting design. I'm not 100% sure if it works, but I'll never forget it. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, framing. Not a lot of framing going on here. Like, the table does help cut off, like, half of the picture. And then you have, like, the bright light that backlights her, but doesn't backlight anyone else, which helps keep her main colors neutral, while everyone else gets kind of washed out by the bright light coming in. That helps. It helps that she's in the center of the image. It helps that you have this arm that, like, shoves this pile of gold forward, that kind of draws you into looking at her at the center of the image right here. I do like that she's apparently, either she's wagering against Twisted Fate or she's saying that she'll take him down or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure what's going on there, but like, between the nails and the knuckle irons and stuff like that, that's a distinctive character as hell, man. And she stands out a lot too, because, like, look at everyone else in the room that she's in. They all look fucking boring compared to her. It's just like, I'm a man with a beard. I'm a man with a beard. I'm a man with a beard. Yeah, very cool. And also, notice we have a Dutch angle here, but we also have something else going on. We have a very slight curvature to the table's edge here. And that's not because the artist couldn't draw a straight line. That's happening either because the table itself is round, which is probably it, but also it gives this subtle fisheye lens effect, almost as though the space is being distorted by a wide-angle lens a little bit, which also helps open the space up a little bit and make the whole place seem bigger. That's Dao Lei again, the same person who did the Saboteur character. And you can kind of see that same anime influence a little bit stronger in the character's face here. But wow, look at those dreadlocks. Man, the rendering on those is great. Holy shit, every little strand of hair. Oh, that's really pretty. Nice, that's cool. Okay, not what we're talking about, though. What's she called? Island Navigator. So she's a Nagakeboros, or a Buru, rather, probably. And you can kind of tell that from the design of her clothing and her face tattoos. And she has a waist. Like, look at that. She has room for organs. Isn't that amazing, ladies and gentlemen? There's a person who looks like she might actually, like, be able to stand up in a stiff breeze. I'll never let that go. So a couple of interesting things going on here. She is like, she's framed, like, there's a framing going on in terms of, like, the rope, the barrel, then the railing, then the rope, and then the sail, which creates a little bit of a framing space for her. But also, she frames herself a little bit by doing this thing where she draws water magic light stuff up and creates this kind of swoop around herself that creates, again, like we talked about with the powder monkeys, this line of interest that even if your eye isn't immediately caught by her, which it should be because she looks amazing, this line will inevitably guide you to her staff, which will end to her, and you will have your eyes drawn to the character themselves, like whether you want it to or not. I'm curious about the magic, because most magic in Bilgewater, especially most magic that has to do with the water, tends to be identified with bright green. Like, that's Nautilus especially, but also, like, deep water magic of all kinds tends to be identified with bright green. We've seen bright gold magic before from the Buru people. That was in the Shadow Isles animated short that I took a look at back when that came out. And I wonder if this is kind of the same thing, that, like, that's just what Buru magic specifically looks like, and it's only Ilawi who has Nagakeboro's magic that is that, like, that has that deep green of the depths, whereas this is much more their style of magic. Curious about that in terms of the lore. But yeah, I like the little details that... So, if you take a look at the tattoos on other characters in Bilgewater, like the Brash Gambler, or the dude in the background here, look at the shape language. You have these swooping curves and rounded shapes, kind of tribal tattooish, but like that are made to look like the tentacles of a squid of some kind. Now take a look at the tattoos on the Island Navigator instead. And all of a sudden you have this very strong angular design, rather, instead. And that's something that's emblematic and identifying of the Buru people. Illaoi has them as well. You can see it also represented at the bottom of her coat here, like this angular, straight line design that is characteristic of her people. And I like that you have this unified aesthetic in Bilgewater, where both the Buru and the pirates are all tattooed, all of them, all the time. Lots of body art going on. But the pirates have this, like, tentacle design, like these swooping, curvy, sharp, pointed lines. And then the Buru people have these stubbier, like, much more, much thicker, much more powerful line work that kind of makes them look like they come from the same place, but from two different cultural traditions in the same place, which is like, that's nice. That's nice world building, in my opinion. Now here's a character. So I think in his interesting. I think in the announcement trailer we had a different art. There was a different artwork for this guy's card. I think it was different. Interesting. I wonder why that got changed. Anyway, here we have Mystifying Magician, the Marvelous Marvolio, I think he's called. Marvolio? Where are my hands? I will now make them appear. Ta-da! Ta-da! Where are my hands? Okay, time to go. Thank you all so very much. I like that. Oops, I made your hands disappear. Anyway, love this character. Look at this smarmy motherfucker. Like, yeah, that's what a Bilgewater stage magician would look like. Some, like, Darren Brown-ass motherfucker scamming people out of their money and taking away their hands. So, again, here the color contrast is different. So, remember how Fizz, in the very first card we looked at tonight, 10 million years ago, Fizz was highlighted by, might as well go back and look at him, by being much darker in tone than most of the environment that surrounds him, especially the sky, but also like the dust clouds and stuff like that. Same trick is being used here, where rather than Marvolio or the... Where is he? Or the Mystifying Magician being, like, explicitly highlighted by being brighter than everything else. Here, he's much darker, almost, than the rest of his environment, especially, like, with the characters here in the background. These characters are almost rendered in sepia tone, right? Like, they're almost just all brown with no distinguishing colors to themselves. Whereas Marvolio has this huge shock of, like, this purple flowing cloak with the red, looking for the English word, with the red on the other side, on the inside of it. He's got this purple coat, and he's got this bright shock of blue tentacles coming out of his hat and all of that stuff. That highlights him against the background of the image because he's contrasting with it, but not because he's highlighted relative to it, but because he's, well, darker than it, essentially, in his color contrast, which is sort of, it's the same trick, but just kind of in reverse, which is, again, another useful compositional technique. And I like that a lot. Like, he's got this edge lighting coming from the thing itself, and I like his expression. Like, look at this smarmy bastard. Like, he looks so confident, and then you look at what he's actually doing, and it's like, hang on, this looks a little Cthulhu. This is a little disconcerting. That's not a card trick. What the hell? So I kind of get the feeling of him as, like, someone who's toying with magic powers a little bit beyond his control. Like, that he doesn't quite understand as such. But he's doing it with confidence anyway, because he's a grifter. And as people are pointing out in chat, oh boy, yeah, that's another narrow waist right there. Holy shit. I didn't notice it at first because he has such a broad chest, but good lord, man. Eat a meal. I'm not sure you can. Like, where would the poop even come out? You don't have an intestine. That is, again, it's a stylization. Whether it works for you is, well, that's your mileage may vary, but I would like to see him have, like, room for spleens. Would be good. This is a little too much. Now that I've noticed it, I can't look away from it. That's not great. And also, I feel like his pose would probably be stronger if instead of his leg going that way, it was more like he's more of a power pose, like more of a ta-da. Oh well, that's a minor thing, but yeah. Boy, howdy. That is not a lot of space for anything. Here, again, scale. So this is something that goes back, at least the place that I first learned about this was in Romantic era paintings. So the Romantics of the Romantic era were obsessed with the grandeur and romance of nature. They had this obsession with like a return to nature, with a return to the grandiosity and greatness of the Garden of Eden, and the greatness of God's power as embodied in nature itself. Like a whole lot of wank. But this is why Romantic poets would often write poems about, oh, nature, good and grand, beautiful trees, flowers, overwhelming you with sensations, like all of that shit. But one of the things that's characteristic of Romantic painting is that when they want to paint a landscape and give you a sense of how big and grand nature is, what they'll include in the image is like a ship, but it's tiny compared to the greatness of the ocean, or a person, but they're tiny compared to the majestic size of a mountain. Like that was basically a little visual trick that they used to showcase the scale of an image, to kind of impart on the viewer that same sense of awe before the majesty of nature that they were so obsessed with. Anyway, that technique still exists to this day, and that's part of the art history of something like this in a video game, in a card game that you play on your phone. Some of the artwork uses the same kinds of techniques that have been used in artwork for, well, hundreds and hundreds of years now, which I always thought is kind of a neat thing, like to put video game art into the context of art history itself. Anyway, large boy, big snake, don't like that. This is why I can't play Subnautica, because that's too much, that's too big. We shouldn't have a space on Earth that's big enough for something like that to be in. No, I don't like it. I don't like it at all, but it's very cool. Again, color, the shock of like bright, almost pinkish, purplish red coming out of the mouth of this thing instantly draws your attention to the most terrifying thing about it, which is the fact that it has teeth on the inside of its mouth! And draws your attention to, like, the action of the picture, which is this giant devouring mouth that's about to make their day really, really shitty. Which, again, bright contrast with the drabness of the rest of the environment generally, which is mostly just dark blue, dark black, a little bit of purple, a little bit of gray here and there. Oh, right, that's a deep card. So that you get a 7/7 for 4. Oh, God. Here's another great character design. YORDLE Grifter. Look at this kid. Look at this guy. Don't you love him already? Aren't you ready to give him all your money for no good reason already? So this image has this is almost One Piece-like. Like, I feel like there's almost a One Piece aesthetic going on here. Because look at the pirate dudes in the background. Look at this guy. Like, he doesn't have any hips at all. He just has a giant upper body. And then he has legs sticking out of his giant upper body. That's like One Piece-like almost in terms of how extreme the contrast is between Mr. Muscle Guy here, whose waist is also way too thin. And then this little beach ball of a man standing behind our Yordle friend. It works for the image because this is so faded out and hidden in the background that you kind of don't see it as a complete cartoonish inconsistency. But wow, that's a bold move for a character design right there. So I don't know who the lady is who's sitting here, but I know a lot of people want to be stepped on by her, I'm sure. I don't think it's Misfortune, because Misfortune doesn't really wear long white cloaks. But he's certainly trying to grift someone. And again, some of the same techniques that we've talked about already are being used here. He's being highlighted by the bright sunlight that's coming in from somewhere. Literally casting a spotlight. You can literally see there's a circle of light on the ground and he's in the middle of it, which highlights him. Then there's that shock of white fur in a background that contains very little bright color. Which again helps to highlight him. And then you have this bright red, I guess it's a fez? Or what are they called? They're not called fezzes, they're called something caps. I don't remember. Which again adds a very bright shock of color to a scene that's otherwise mostly relatively desaturated outside of the sunlight. And then you have a little bit of framing where, like, or not framing, but composition where the curve of the lady's leg, like that pointed toe right there, also helps guide your eyes a little bit to the thing that she's going to kick in the face if he doesn't come up with the money that he owes her, I think. And yeah, nice little composition. Again, a Dutch angle that I don't think is strictly necessary, but here I think, again, the point of the Dutch angle is if you had a right angle, like if you had a completely horizontal angle here, this guy's head and these guys, like these guys here, their heads would be out of frame unless you drastically change the framing. So the artist chose a Dutch angle so that they could get the details that they wanted on the characters in the background, which it doesn't add anything to the mood of the picture as such. Like, I think it works a little bit in that he's clearly trying to pull off a grift, like he's trying to pull off a scam, and so having an unstable atmosphere in the image works on that account, but it's also a little much, I think, for the purposes.